Welcome to my channel. Today we are looking at air crash investigation. E3 deadly crashes revealed. Air crash investigation is back with another 20 episodes of in-depth crash analysis. Join investigators as they re-examine accidents that have never before been scrutinized by experts. In this season, they'll employ the latest technology to expose new details. They'll interview key witnesses and uncover untold stories to reveal how, why, and when these deadly crashes occurred. In today's episode, we will cover an air crash that happened in Argentina. The Convair CV-440 was not supposed to be in the sky. It had been grounded for several months because it wasn't airworthy. So why did it end up crashing into a hill? This is Air Crash Investigation. Deadly crashes revealed. On April 9, 2007, Flight 681 was flying from El Calafate to Buenos Aires. On board were 43 people. As the plane reached its cruising altitude of 22,000 feet, the pilots were informed about some traffic. Controllers wanted Flight 681 to alter its route so that it would not intersect with another flight path. The pilots acknowledged the instructions and started the procedure to get the plane out of the clouds. The captain then contacted approach control to confirm that there was no other traffic in the area. He was cleared to continue on the ILS frequency for the RY-09 approach to runway 17. The pilots carried out the vectoring as requested and were now approaching their destination. The twin-engine turboprop Convair CV-440 Metropolitan was first certified in 1959. During its operational life, the plane went through several changes in ownership. By 2007, the plane was owned by a charter airline called Andes Líneas Aéreas. A few minutes later, the pilots were given a heading of 080 degrees to intercept the localizer beacon. The plane was lower than it should have been. The controller knew that he had to do something fast or else the plane would end up overshooting the runway. With so many people on board, it's hard to imagine that anyone survived the crash. The FDR showed that the plane was actually stable and under control all the way till impact. The investigators then sat down with the families of the victims to find out what they knew. The captain had been the victim of pressure from management. Management wanted this flight to happen no matter what. The investigators were able to determine this because the CVR recorded everything that happened in the cockpit. Even though the plane was not airworthy, the captain was tempted by the bonus, and he decided to take the risk. They recommended that the Aviation Authority implement a system to prevent pilots from being pressured into flying unsafe planes. If you liked this video, please leave a like. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more. They also recommended that controllers be trained on how to deal with situations where pilots are ignoring their instructions. These recommendations were implemented. But tragically, this would be the last time that the aviation industry would see a deadly accident caused by an unairworthy plane. The controller also took a risk when he let an unairworthy plane anywhere near his airspace. The captain and the controller's actions led to this disaster. Had they done their jobs properly, this disaster could have been avoided. The controller probably thought that the pilots were focused on getting the plane lined up with the runway. He believed that they would level off once they got visual reference, but the pilots never leveled off. Instead, they kept on descending. The controller then gave the go-around order, but it was too late. The plane was already too low to perform a safe go-around. The captain was even offered a bonus to operate the flight. Sadly, the captain accepted the offer. But the captain wasn't the only one who was at fault. The controller also played a part in this disaster. When the controller noticed that the plane was below glide path, he should have immediately ordered a go-around. But he failed to do so. He knew that the plane was below glide path, but he thought that he could correct the situation by giving the pilots altitude calls. But he should have known that the pilots might not hear him. The family said that the plane had been having mechanical issues for quite some time. There was no way that the plane was safe to fly. Why did the pilots take off? Why did the controller let them take off? The investigators were no closer to figuring out what caused this disaster. Sadly, nobody did. The investigators looked at the plane's history and found out that the plane was not even supposed to be in the sky. He explained that the plane did undergo a test flight after the maintenance checks. The test pilot signed off on the aircraft maintenance logbook, stating that the plane was airworthy, but the plane wasn't. The test pilot had falsified the documents. This led to the investigators to ground all the planes that were maintained by that company. In the previous month, the plane underwent a check to see if it was airworthy. It wasn't. The plane had several items that needed fixing, including its autopilot system. And until those items were fixed, the plane was not allowed to fly. But somehow the plane ended up in the sky. The controller quickly issued a series of altitude instructions to get the plane back on glide. The controller kept issuing altitude instructions to the pilots, but his instructions were going unheard. Flight 681 continued to descend below the decision height. At 1811 UTC, the plane was 200 feet above ground level and descending. The controller knew that if the plane continued its descent, it would smash into the trees surrounding the runway. The controller knew he had to act fast. He knew that if he didn't do something fast, the plane would end up crashing into the trees. The controller knew what he had to do. He immediately issued a go-around order, but it was too little and too late. Flight 681 smashed into the trees. The plane was obliterated on impact. All 43 people on board lost their lives. The pilots were making good progress towards their destination. But as the plane approached the airport, the pilots needed to make a slight adjustment to their course. At 1807 UTC, the pilots requested a straight-in approach to runway 17. Their request was granted. The pilots thanked the controller and informed him that they were in the clouds. After the pilots received clearance, they set the plane onto a southerly course. At 1810 UTC, the controller noticed that Flight 681 was deviating from the correct approach path. With the wreckage located, the authorities started to piece together what happened. The investigators then looked at the flight data recorder. It revealed that the plane was actually in good working order. The investigators then sat down with the maintenance manager of the plane. As the investigation progressed, the investigators started to get a clearer picture of what happened. When the controller noticed that the plane was well below glide path, he made several altitude calls to the pilots, but the pilots never responded. This accident was a perfect example of how greed can lead to disaster. Andes Linea Aérea wanted this flight to happen no matter what. The investigators then came up with several recommendations. That's all for today.